Welcome to Conspiracy Files. I'm your host, Zoe Parker, and in today's episode, we're diving into one of the most bizarre and puzzling incidents in American history, the Battle of Los Angeles. In the early hours of February 25th, 1942, less than 3 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the city erupted in chaos. Anti-aircraft guns fired into the night sky, searchlights cut through the dark, and military personnel were convinced they were under attack. But here's the strange part. No enemy planes were ever found. So, what really happened that night? Some believe the military engaged with an unidentified object, a UFO, while others claim it was simply a case of mass hysteria. Was this truly an alien encounter, or was it something far less sensational? Stay tuned. The year was 1942, and the world was a much different place than it is today. The aftermath of the attack on Pearl Harbor in December of 1941 had left America reeling. The country, thrust into World War II, was mobilizing at an unprecedented rate. Anxiety was high, and the notion of enemy forces, whether from the Axis powers or even further afield, was on everyone's mind. The Western U.S., particularly California, had been put on high alert. The fear of a Japanese attack was real, and no one could afford to take chances. The events of February 25th unfolded less than 3 months after Pearl Harbor, and the mood in the country was one of heightened fear and suspicion. The military was on edge, constantly preparing for possible attacks, particularly along the Pacific coast, which had long been considered vulnerable to a naval assault. The looming possibility of a Japanese invasion or an aerial strike from Japanese bombers was one that consumed the nation's defense strategy. Coastal cities like Los Angeles were especially vulnerable in the eyes of military commanders, as they were key industrial centers and symbols of American power. The city of Los Angeles itself was far from immune to wartime anxieties. The area had been transformed by war, with factories now producing war materials and defense plants working around the clock. Air raid drills had become commonplace, with civilians regularly instructed to take cover in case of an attack. It was a time when the fear of the unknown was as great as the fear of the enemy. And in the midst of this backdrop of heightened tension, the military had been on high alert for weeks, primed for the possibility of an attack. On the night of February 24th, an air raid alarm blared across the city, sending the city into an immediate frenzy. The fear of Japanese bombers coming in from the Pacific was very much alive, and the military was quick to respond. Thousands of soldiers manned anti-aircraft batteries, and searchlights were positioned across the city to scan the skies for any potential threats. The people of Los Angeles, already living under a dark cloud of wartime anxiety, were bracing for impact. As the night wore on, the situation grew more intense. Searchlights began to sweep the skies, and anti-aircraft guns were fired in the direction of a target that no one could yet identify. The sounds of explosions echoed through the city, and military personnel scrambled to identify the target. Despite their efforts, no enemy planes were found. No bombers had been detected, and yet the military kept firing. This would go down in history as the Battle of Los Angeles, though the true nature of what happened that night remains shrouded in uncertainty. The public would later be told that it was a case of war jitters, a false alarm fueled by the fears of a nation still reeling from Pearl Harbor. But the unexplained events and witness testimonies, particularly from military personnel and civilians who saw something in the sky, have continued to fuel speculation ever since. The cultural context of the time also plays an important role in understanding the incident. The U.S. was deeply entrenched in World War II, and the atmosphere was one of constant vigilance. The world was at war, and the possibility of any threat, foreign or domestic, could not be ruled out. With this sense of paranoia lingering in the air, it's no surprise that the events of February 25th would quickly become a topic of intrigue, especially for those who believed there was more to the story than a mere false alarm. And so, the mystery began to take root. What exactly had happened over Los Angeles that night? Was it simply a case of nerves gone wild? Or was there something far more extraordinary in the skies above the city? The answer? Like the events themselves, would remain elusive. pushing the public's imagination to new heights and sowing the seeds of a mystery that continues to captivate to this day. The Battle of Los Angeles, on the surface, seemed like a tragic misunderstanding, a city in panic, an enemy attack that never came. But there are those who believe the official explanation of a false alarm doesn't account for what happened that night. What if the military wasn't blindly shooting into the sky in an overreaction, but was responding to something real, something they couldn't explain? The core theory that has persisted for decades is that Los Angeles wasn't under attack by Japanese aircraft, as initially suggested. Rather, many theorists argue that the city was, in fact, confronted by something far more mysterious, a UFO. An unidentified flying object, perhaps even extraterrestrial in origin, was said to be the target of the relentless gunfire. Proponents of this theory point to several key pieces of evidence to support their claims. First, the most compelling and tangible evidence: photographs. In the hours following the incident, images surfaced that seemed to show a glowing object high in the sky, surrounded by searchlights and the explosive bursts of anti-aircraft fire. These photos, taken from multiple angles, appear to capture something distinct, hovering above the city, unscathed by the barrage of artillery aimed at it. While the government insisted these objects were nothing more than weather balloons or sky flares, UFO enthusiasts argue they depict something far more elusive. For them, the most perplexing detail was the object's apparent ability to withstand hundreds of rounds of anti-aircraft fire. As searchlights locked onto the object and shells exploded around it, witnesses described the target as being remarkably unaffected. Military personnel reported seeing a large, metallic, almost indestructible object in the sky, while civilians below were equally convinced of what they had seen. For some, this was a glaring piece of the puzzle. How could such an object survive multiple direct hits without any visible damage, unless it was of an entirely different nature? In addition to the photographs, several military officials and soldiers involved in the defense efforts that night offered testimonies that reinforced the theory of a non-terrestrial object. These accounts ranged from descriptions of a silvery, saucer-like shape to reports of the object moving in ways that defied the logic of aviation technology at the time. Eyewitnesses said the object appeared to hover and move erratically, its behavior more akin to something out of science fiction than an enemy bomber. Perhaps the most baffling piece of evidence, however, lies in the military's shifting story in the days following the incident. Initially, the official narrative blamed war jitters and false alarms. However, over the following days, the story evolved. Eyewitness accounts were questioned, but key elements of the event, such as the unexplained explosions and the reports of strange flying objects, were left largely unaddressed. The inconsistencies in the official story have only fueled speculation. For UFO theorists, these inconsistencies are seen as deliberate cover-ups. They believe that the military either knew more than it let on or was actively concealing the truth, possibly out of fear of causing mass panic or revealing information about extraterrestrial life that the government wasn't prepared to share. The timing of the event, just months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, also plays into the theory, suggesting that the country's heightened state of alert made it an ideal moment for an extraterrestrial encounter to go unnoticed or be easily dismissed. Taken together, the evidence, the photographs, eyewitness testimonies, and the contradictory official reports paints a compelling picture for those who believe the Battle of Los Angeles wasn't just a case of wartime paranoia. For them, it was a real confrontation with something from beyond our world. Yet, for all the explanations put forth, certain elements of that night remain difficult to reconcile. The unanswered questions, those strange inconsistencies, missing pieces, and lingering anomalies, continue to fuel speculation and debate, keeping the mystery of the Battle of Los Angeles alive decades later. One of the most puzzling aspects is the sheer volume of gunfire. Nearly 1,400 rounds of anti-aircraft ammunition were fired into the sky that night. A level of response that suggests the military was convinced it was engaging a real target. If there was nothing there, why did the barrage last for hours? And if the object was merely a misidentified balloon, How did it withstand such intense fire without leaving a trace? Even if nothing had been shot down, some kind of debris, whether from the supposed craft or from exploded shells, should have been recovered in significant quantities. Yet, no wreckage was ever produced. Then there are the conflicting eyewitness accounts. Some described seeing a large glowing object that moved slowly over the city, seemingly unaffected by the attack. Others reported multiple smaller lights darting through the sky, moving erratically in ways that didn't match known aircraft of the time. Civilians and military personnel alike spoke of an object that appeared to hover, maneuver with agility, and disappear without a trace. If what they saw was nothing more than smoke, searchlight reflections, or optical illusions, why did so many independent witnesses describe something tangible in the sky? Another lingering mystery is the behavior of the military in the days following the event. Initial statements suggested an enemy attack had taken place, yet within 24 hours, officials reversed course, calling it a false alarm. This abrupt shift in narrative only deepened suspicions. If it had been a case of mistaken identity, why wasn't the true cause, such as a weather balloon or atmospheric disturbance, conclusively identified? Instead, the incident was largely dismissed without a clear resolution, leaving more questions than answers. There's also the matter of classified military records. Decades after the event, many expected that once secret documents might shed new light on what truly happened. However, no definitive records explaining the full extent of the military's response or its internal conclusions have surfaced. The lack of transparency has only fueled speculation that something unusual was indeed encountered that night, something the government either didn't understand or didn't want to acknowledge. The timing of the event also raises questions. If the military was already on high alert for a Japanese attack, why did radar operators struggle to confirm what was in the sky? Radar technology at the time was primitive, but reports indicate that something was detected moving toward Los Angeles before vanishing. If no enemy aircraft were in the area, what set off the alarms? And why, if there had been legitimate concerns about a Japanese strike, was there no coordinated follow-up action from the military? No air pursuit, no search for downed enemy pilots, and no further investigation into what had caused such a massive defensive reaction. These inconsistencies, some subtle, others glaring, are what make the Battle of Los Angeles more than just a wartime curiosity. The gaps in the official story, the missing evidence, and the enduring mystery of what truly loomed over the city that night continue to leave room for speculation. For every question answered, new ones emerge, ensuring that this strange chapter in history remains as enigmatic as ever. Others take a different view. To skeptics, the events of that night, though remarkable, were not evidence of an extraterrestrial encounter, nor a government cover-up. Instead, they argue that the Battle of Los Angeles was a confluence of fear, misidentification, and the limitations of wartime technology. One of the most widely accepted explanations is that weather balloons or other airborne objects, such as flares or even drifting debris, triggered the alert. Balloons were commonly used for military purposes, including weather tracking and target practice, and their reflective surfaces could have caught the beams of searchlights, creating the illusion of a solid hovering craft. The glare from the lights, combined with smoke from anti-aircraft fire, could have distorted perceptions, causing witnesses to see movement where none existed. Some suggest that panic played a role, as once the first shots were fired, a chain reaction ensued, making it nearly impossible to reassess the situation in real time. Military historians point to the heightened state of alert following the attack on Pearl Harbor just weeks earlier. Los Angeles, a key coastal city, was bracing for the possibility of a Japanese air raid. Tensions were high, and reports of enemy activity along the West Coast had already put defense forces on edge. The presence of an unknown object, whether a balloon, a misidentified aircraft, or even a flock of birds, could have been enough to trigger a rapid, full-scale response. The psychological weight of wartime paranoia, combined with limited radar capabilities, may have amplified an otherwise minor incident into a night-long battle against an imagined threat. Another explanation focuses on the technological limitations of the era. Radar systems were still in their early stages, prone to misreadings and false positives. Some suggest that what was detected approaching the coastline that night may have been nothing more than a drifting civilian aircraft, or even an atmospheric anomaly. Additionally, searchlights and anti-aircraft tracers could have created visual effects that made the sky appear alive with movement, further confusing those on the ground. Some skeptics question the assumption that an actual object was present at all. They argue that mass hysteria, combined with suggestive reporting in the press, may have led witnesses to believe they had seen something extraordinary, when in reality, they were looking at smoke, shrapnel bursts, and scattered lights. The chaotic nature of the event, hundreds of people looking skyward in confusion, meant that individual reports varied wildly, adding to the sense of mystery. There are also those who believe the government's shifting explanations were not signs of a cover-up, but rather evidence of uncertainty. With no definitive wreckage or captured enemy aircraft, authorities may have simply been unable to provide clear answers. The initial claims of an attack may have been based on incomplete information, and as details emerged, officials revised their stance. Rather than an effort to suppress the truth, some argue, the government's response was a reflection of the confusion of the moment. Ultimately, the skeptical viewpoint does not dismiss the significance of the event. It merely reframes it. The Battle of Los Angeles remains a striking example of how fear, miscommunication, and technology can intersect to create an enduring mystery, one that continues to be debated long after the searchlights dimmed and the last echoes of gunfire faded into the night. For some, the Battle of Los Angeles represents more than a wartime misidentification or a case of mass hysteria. It is, they argue, a glimpse into something far more extraordinary. Over the years, a range of speculative and fringe theories have emerged, each offering a bold, sometimes unsettling alternative to the official narrative. One of the most provocative ideas suggests that what was seen in the sky that night wasn't merely a UFO, but an intentional reconnaissance mission by an extraterrestrial intelligence. According to this theory, the object, or objects, hovering over Los Angeles was observing human military capabilities, testing responses, and possibly even demonstrating its own technological superiority. Supporters of this idea point to the alleged invulnerability of the craft, which seemed to withstand relentless anti-aircraft fire without suffering damage. The possibility that a non-human entity was deliberately assessing humanity's defensive measures adds an unsettling dimension to the event, one that implies the presence of forces operating with knowledge and intent far beyond our own. Others take this notion even further, suggesting that the incident was not merely an observation, but an attempted communication, one that was misunderstood and met with aggression. In this view, the bright lights and strange movements reported by witnesses were part of an effort to make contact, only for the military to misinterpret it as a threat. Some speculate that the fallout from this event led to secret government efforts to either suppress future contact or prepare for future encounters, reinforcing long-standing beliefs about hidden alliances or conflicts between humanity and extraterrestrial beings. There are also those who believe the Battle of Los Angeles was not extraterrestrial in nature at all, but rather evidence of a secret technological breakthrough, one that was either being tested or accidentally revealed. Some theorists suggest that the object was an early experiment in anti-gravity aircraft or advanced propulsion systems, possibly a product of classified wartime research. Others posit that it may have been a foreign prototype, potentially of German origin, hinting at early developments in what would later become known as stealth technology or experimental aerospace engineering. The idea that the government may have been testing or encountering such technology decades before the public was aware only adds another layer to the mystery. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests an interdimensional or time-related anomaly, something that briefly intruded into human perception before vanishing. Proponents of this idea argue that the erratic movement, the strange resilience to attack, and the sudden disappearance of the object all point to something beyond conventional physics. If true, this would mean that the events of that night were not just a historical curiosity, but evidence of an encounter with a phenomenon that defies known scientific understanding. Whether seen as a test, an accident, a warning, or something even stranger, these theories all share one common thread: the belief that what happened over Los Angeles in 1942 was not random, not a mistake, but a moment of significance. A moment where the boundaries of what we consider possible were momentarily and perhaps deliberately pushed beyond their limits. To some, the Battle of Los Angeles is not an isolated event, but part of a much larger pattern, one that connects it to other historical mysteries, secret government operations, and global conspiracies. The strange events of that night, they argue, share striking similarities with other incidents where unidentified aerial phenomena, classified technology, and covert agendas seem to intertwine. One of the most frequent comparisons is to the Roswell incident of 1947. Just 5 years after the events over Los Angeles, another unidentified object reportedly crashed in the New Mexico desert, sparking decades of speculation about a possible government cover-up. In both cases, the military's initial reaction suggested an acknowledgement of something unusual, only for official explanations to later dismiss the events as mundane. Some theorists suggest that the Battle of Los Angeles was an early encounter, possibly even a failed shoot-down attempt, of the same unknown intelligence that would later be implicated in Roswell. If true, this would indicate that such events were not random, but part of an ongoing and concealed phenomenon. Others draw connections to more shadowy government programs, particularly those linked to secret weapons research and experimental aircraft. The development of projects like the Manhattan Project and later classified operations such as MK-Ultra and the U-2 spy plane program have shown that the government is capable of conducting large-scale, highly classified experiments without public knowledge. Some believe the object over Los Angeles may have been an early test of advanced aviation technology, possibly linked to research that would later emerge in the Cold War. If such technology existed in 1942, it raises questions about how far these programs had advanced and what else may have been concealed under the guise of national security. There are also connections drawn to the broader theme of UFO secrecy, particularly the claims made by former military personnel and intelligence officers that the U.S. government has been aware of unidentified craft for decades. Some suggest that the rapid military response and subsequent lack of explanation mirror patterns seen in later incidents, where official narratives shift or information is withheld. If the government did indeed engage an unknown aerial presence that night, it would mark one of the earliest recorded encounters of what would become an ongoing mystery. Beyond military secrecy, the Battle of Los Angeles is sometimes linked to global conspiracy theories about hidden powers shaping world events. Some speculate that elite groups operating beyond public scrutiny have long been aware of advanced technologies, either of human or non-human origin, and have worked to keep them hidden. This theory ties into beliefs about secret space programs, breakaway civilizations, and the idea that powerful interests manipulate public perception to maintain control over knowledge that could upend conventional understandings of history and science. Regardless of the perspective, the connections drawn between the Battle of Los Angeles and other historical conspiracies speak to a larger pattern, one where secrecy, fear, and unanswered questions fuel speculation. Whether part of a classified government program, an extraterrestrial mystery, or something even more complex, the event remains woven into the fabric of a broader conspiracy landscape, one that continues to captivate and divide those who seek the truth. Despite decades of speculation and analysis, the Battle of Los Angeles remains an enigma. Theories have been proposed, explanations offered, yet certain aspects of that night continue to defy clear resolution. It is these lingering questions, these gaps in understanding, that have kept the mystery alive in the public consciousness, ensuring that the events of February 1942 are not easily forgotten. One of the most persistent uncertainties is the true nature of the object, or objects, seen that night. If it was simply a case of mass hysteria or mistaken identity, why did so many eyewitnesses, including military personnel, report something tangible in the sky? If it was an enemy aircraft, why was there no follow-up attack or wreckage recovered? If it was a balloon or similar airborne object, why did it appear to withstand relentless anti-aircraft fire with no visible damage? These questions remain unanswered, leaving room for continued speculation. Another unresolved issue is the military's response. Nearly 1,400 rounds of ammunition were fired, yet no confirmed target was ever struck. For those who believe the event involved a genuine, unknown presence, this detail suggests an encounter with something beyond conventional technology. Others question whether the military, in the chaos of wartime, reacted to an illusion, perhaps a combination of searchlight reflections, smoke, and the psychological tension of a nation on high alert. But if it was an illusion, why did trained radar operators report a real object? Why did the alarm persist for hours? The lack of a definitive explanation has only fueled continued debate. There is also the issue of classified records, or the lack thereof. Given the scale of the response and the widespread media coverage at the time, one might expect extensive military documentation detailing the event. Yet, beyond the official statements that dismissed the incident as a false alarm, no comprehensive report has ever surfaced. If there was nothing extraordinary that night, why does so little documentation exist? Did records once exist, but were lost over time? Or were they deliberately hidden? The absence of clarity has led to speculation that key details about the event remain concealed. Beyond the facts, there's the question of why the mystery endures. Some believe it persists because it taps into deeper fears about the unknown, about hidden truths, about the limits of human understanding. Others argue that it remains alive because, in an age of increasing government transparency, some aspects of history still seem locked away, just out of reach. Perhaps the true significance of the Battle of Los Angeles lies not only in what happened that night, but in what it represents. A moment when the world glimpsed something unexplained, something unresolved, and something that, even now, continues to challenge our perception of reality. Whatever the truth may be, one fact is certain. The questions have not faded, the intrigue has not diminished, and the mystery, after all these years, refuses to be forgotten. The Battle of Los Angeles remains suspended between history and myth, fact and speculation. Decades have passed, yet the events of that night continue to inspire debate, curiosity, and even a sense of unease. The questions left behind, what was in the sky, why the military reacted as it did, and whether the truth was ever fully revealed, persist, echoing through time like distant searchlights scanning the darkness. For some, the mystery is a testament to the fallibility of human perception, a cautionary tale about how fear and uncertainty can shape history. They see it as an example of wartime paranoia, a moment when the weight of global conflict blurred reality, transforming an ordinary occurrence into an extraordinary event. If this is true, then the Battle of Los Angeles serves as a reminder of how easily perception can be influenced, how even trained observers can be misled by expectation, stress, and the chaos of the moment. For others, however, the mystery represents something far more profound. They believe it stands as one of history's earliest encounters with something beyond human comprehension, whether extraterrestrial, technological, or something yet to be imagined. To them, the silence that followed the event was not evidence of confusion, but of knowledge deliberately withheld. If true, the implications are staggering. It would mean that what happened that night was more than just a misunderstanding. It was a moment in which humanity briefly glimpsed something greater, only to have it buried beneath time, secrecy, and skepticism. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the mystery is not just what happened, but why it still matters. Why, after all these years, does this event still capture the imagination? Why do people continue to search for answers? The enduring fascination may lie in the simple fact that some mysteries are never meant to be fully explained. They linger because they challenge our understanding, because they invite us to consider possibilities beyond what we know. Whether one sees the Battle of Los Angeles as a case of mistaken identity, a cover-up, or an encounter with the unknown, one truth remains. It has not been forgotten. It exists in the space between history and legend, forever inviting those who dare to look closer, to question, and to wonder. Because sometimes the most enduring mysteries are the ones that refuse to be resolved. Thanks for tuning in to the Conspiracy Files podcast. We're here with brand new episodes every Wednesday. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to follow us and be sure to rate, review, and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. You can also reach out anytime by emailing us at contact@theconspiracyfilespodcast.com. Until next time, and remember, the truth is out there. If you enjoyed this episode and want to dive deeper into the world of conspiracy theories, consider subscribing for exclusive access to the material they don't want you to hear. As a subscriber, you'll get banned episodes, episodes deemed too controversial for mainstream platforms, members-only bonus episodes, not available anywhere else, extended director's cut versions of your favorite episodes, early access to new content before it's released to the public, and much more. Thank you for your support. The link is in the description below. Join now.